You have lived through seasons that demanded more of you than you ever thought you could give, and in that giving, you discovered truths that rewrote the way you see yourself. You're no longer who you used to be, not because the world gave you permission to change, but because life itself required it. The roads you walked carved lessons into your spirit, and those lessons shaped a strength that cannot be undone. You are not standing in the same place anymore, and though people may expect you to return to the version of you they once knew, that version no longer exists. What once felt comfortable now feels too small. The spaces you once shrank to fit into now feel suffocating. You no longer bend in ways that break your own soul just to be accepted. There is a shift within you that others may not understand, but you understand it deeply. It is the shift of someone who has learned what peace really costs and what freedom truly feels like. You are not harder, you are wiser. You are not distant, you are more whole. You do not carry yourself as you once did, because the weight you once bore is no longer yours to carry. And this change did not come all at once. It came quietly, moment by moment, choice by choice, until one day you realized you no longer flinched at the same words, no longer begged for the same love, no longer tolerated the same wounds. That is the evidence of healing. Not that you erase your past, but that you outgrow the need to live in it. You no longer speak the language of pain as fluently as you once did, because now you are fluent in the language of self-worth. This transformation is both liberation and challenge. Liberation, because you now walk with a clarity that cannot be bought, and a dignity that cannot be taken. Challenge, because the world around you often resists the change it sees in you. People will question your distance, your silence, your refusal to play the roles you once accepted. They will accuse you of being different, and they are right, you are. But what they cannot see is the cost of remaining the same. They cannot feel the nights you endured, the tears you shed, the quiet prayers you whispered for a better tomorrow. They cannot measure the weight of your resilience. Only you know the price you paid to stand in this new version of yourself. And so, you honor it. You honor the growth by no longer apologizing for it. You honor the change by refusing to shrink back to what no longer serves you. You honor the healing by stepping into places that celebrate who you are now, not who you used to be. This is not arrogance, it is awareness. Awareness that your spirit deserves spaces where it can breathe, where it can be nurtured, where it can expand without guilt. The people who truly see you will not mourn the version of you that no longer exists. They will celebrate the person you have become. They will not guilt you for your boundaries, but will respect the strength it took to draw them. They will not cling to your past mistakes, but will admire the wisdom you carry from them. These are the connections that align with who you are becoming. And those who fall away in this process are not a loss. They are simply proof that not everyone was meant to walk with you into your next chapter. Every change within you carries a message. You are not here to remain unchanged. You are here to evolve. You are here to unfold into the person you were always capable of being, even if the world around you resists it. Growth does not ask for permission. It simply demands that you stop betraying yourself. And once you stop betraying yourself, you discover a peace so steady that no storm can take it away. This peace is not fragile. It is not built on illusions or approval. It is rooted in truth, and truth endures. You no longer need to defend who you are, because your presence itself testifies to your transformation. You no longer need to explain why you have changed, because the evidence is written in the way you move, the way you love, the way you no longer settle. You are no longer who you used to be, and that is your freedom. And yes, there is grief in this freedom. Grief for the old versions of yourself that once felt safe, even if they were small. Grief for the relationships that could not survive your growth. Grief for the comfort of patterns you outgrew. But grief does not mean regret. It means you have lived, you have learned, and you are willing to release what no longer fits. Beneath the grief lies gratitude. Gratitude that you survived long enough to see this day. Gratitude that you endured long enough to discover this strength. Gratitude that you now stand in a truth that once felt impossible. So when you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back, do not fear that you've lost yourself. You have not lost, you have arrived. You have stepped into a self that is more authentic, more whole, more aligned with the life you are meant to live. You are no longer who you used to be, and that is not something to apologize for. It is something to honor. It is something to embrace. It is something to live fully every single day, because the world does not need the version of you that broke yourself just to be loved. The world needs the version of you who knows your worth, who protects your peace, who carries your scars as proof of survival and not as signs of shame. That version of you, the one you are today, is enough. That version of you is the reason you have made it this far. That version of you is the reason you will keep moving forward, unshaken, unstoppable, and free. And when you step into this recognition, you start to carry yourself differently. There is a steadiness in your steps that wasn't there before, a quiet knowing that guides you through situations that once left you trembling. You do not need to announce your transformation. It is evident in the way you move through life, the way you choose silence over arguments, the way you allow yourself to walk away from what does not honor you. This shift is not about proving yourself. It is about protecting yourself. It is about choosing peace over performance, truth over pretense, alignment over approval. As you grow into this new version of yourself, the conversations you entertain begin to change. You no longer find joy in gossip, drama, or shallow exchanges that drain your spirit. Instead, you long for depth, for meaning, for dialogue that nourishes your mind and uplifts your heart. You may find the circle around you becoming smaller, but it is not a loss, it is refinement. You are no longer available for the noise that distracts you from your purpose. Your energy becomes selective, and in that selectivity, you preserve your strength. This selectivity extends to your time as well, where once you said yes to everything, often at the expense of your own well-being, now you pause before committing. You ask yourself if this aligns with your values, if this feeds your growth, if this deserves the limited energy you carry. In this way, you reclaim your hours, and with them, you reclaim your life. What once felt urgent begins to lose its hold, because you understand that not every demand requires your attention, not every call deserves your answer, and not every door needs to be opened. And while the world may label this selfish, you know it is sacred. For too long, you gave until you were empty, mistaking self-neglect for generosity. But real love does not drain, it sustains. Real love is not about depletion, it is about reciprocity. And so you learn that protecting your time, protecting your energy, protecting your spirit is the most loving act you can offer, not only to yourself, but to those who are truly connected to you. Because when you are whole, your presence carries power. When you are nourished, your love becomes richer, deeper, more enduring. As this awareness deepens, you also begin to see that not everyone is meant to understand your journey. Some people will misinterpret your boundaries as arrogance, your silence as rejection, your distance as indifference. But you cannot afford to keep explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You cannot dilute your growth just to make others comfortable with it. So, you release the need to be understood by all and focus instead on being true to yourself. And in that release, you discover a freedom that no validation could ever offer. This freedom teaches you something else too, that the approval you once chased was never the source of your worth. You no longer perform to be loved. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to prove your value. The applause that once intoxicated you now feels hollow because you understand that true fulfillment is not found in external praise, it is found in internal peace. And when peace is your measure, you no longer compromise yourself for the fleeting satisfaction of acceptance. With this peace comes a deeper relationship with stillness, where once you ran from silence, filling every moment with distraction, now you welcome it. You sit with yourself without fear of what you might discover because you trust the person you are becoming. You allow quiet to heal you, to restore you, to remind you of truths the noise of the world often drowns out. Stillness becomes your teacher, guiding you to listen more to your intuition, to your body, to your heart. You realize you no longer need the world's constant noise to feel alive. You are alive in the quiet, and that aliveness is enough. And the more you honor this stillness, the clearer your path becomes. Decisions that once overwhelmed you now feel lighter because you no longer choose out of fear or desperation. You choose from alignment. You no longer ask, "Will this make me loved?" But instead, "Does this honor who I am becoming?" And with that simple shift, you cut through confusion. Your choices start to mirror your healing. Your path starts to reflect your values. Your life begins to resemble the truth you once thought was out of reach. But with this alignment also comes sacrifice. You begin to notice the weight of things you cannot carry anymore: relationships, habits, environments, even parts of yourself. Letting them go is not easy, but you understand that clinging to them would cost you your peace. So you release, even when it hurts, because you know that healing does not come without pruning. Growth is not only about what you gain, but about what you are willing to lose for the sake of becoming. And though the loss may sting, the freedom it brings is greater. And in time, you look back and realize that every ending was necessary. Every closed chapter was making space for this moment, the moment where you are no longer who you used to be. The grief of release transforms into the gratitude of renewal. The tears that once symbolized heartbreak now symbolize resilience. You begin to see that your past did not break you. It prepared you. It gave you the strength to say no when once you said yes, to walk away when once you stayed, to believe in yourself when once you doubted. Now, your life is no longer measured by how much you endure, but by how much you honor yourself. You no longer wear suffering as a badge of love. You no longer confuse sacrifice with worth. You have shifted the ground beneath your feet, and though the world may still see you as who you once were, you know better. You carry within you the evidence of change, the weight of wisdom, the unshakable truth that you cannot return to what you outgrew. And so you move forward, steady and unafraid, embracing the unfolding of this new self. You are no longer available to the patterns that once consumed you. You are no longer bound by the fears that once held you. You are no longer defined by the limitations others placed on you. You are not who you used to be, and that is not only your truth, it is your power. And as you step further into this unfolding version of yourself, the changes continue to ripple into areas of your life you once never questioned. You begin to notice how your priorities have shifted, not because someone told you they should, but because your inner compass now points toward what sustains you instead of what depletes you. The urgency you once felt to keep up, to compete, to constantly prove, starts to dissolve. You recognize that moving at your own pace is not weakness, it is wisdom. You no longer confuse rushing with progress or noise with importance. Instead, you choose the path of intention, a path that reflects the truth you are now living. In this space, even your relationship with work and ambition changes. Once, you may have poured yourself into endless striving, believing that your worth depended on how much you achieved or how visible your success became. But now, you approach your goals differently. You pursue them not to earn love or validation, but to express the fullness of who you are. Ambition no longer comes from emptiness, it comes from alignment. You no longer chase outcomes that compromise your peace. You pursue only those that align with your growth. This does not mean you aim lower, it means you aim truer. And with this truer aim, you also learn to rest without guilt. Where once rest felt like laziness, it now feels like strength. You understand that you cannot pour endlessly without replenishment, and you refuse to confuse burnout with dedication. You embrace the balance of effort and ease, knowing that both are necessary for a whole life. This balance protects you from falling back into the cycles that once left you drained. It reminds you that your worth is not in constant doing, it is in being, in existing as you are, without condition. This awareness carries into how you engage with others. You no longer overextend yourself to prove loyalty. You no longer silence your truth to keep peace. You no longer accept connections that thrive on taking without giving. Instead, you invest in relationships that honor the balance of giving and receiving, that recognize your presence as valuable without demanding you lose yourself in the process. This new standard may reduce the number of people in your life, but it raises the quality of the ones who remain. And in that quality, you discover a fulfillment you never found in the crowds. Your standards are no longer negotiable, and that is not because you have grown arrogant, but because you have grown aware. You know what drains you, and you refuse to return to it. You know what nourishes you, and you choose it without apology. This clarity shapes every decision you make, from the smallest to the greatest. You no longer hesitate when your peace is at stake. You no longer bargain with your dignity. And you no longer feel guilty for choosing yourself, because you finally understand that choosing yourself does not mean abandoning others. It means showing up with wholeness instead of fragments. As you walk in this new clarity, you start to see the subtle ways it influences your daily life. Your mornings no longer feel like battles. They become opportunities to align yourself before the world demands your energy. Your nights no longer echo with regret. They close with gratitude for the choices you made to honor yourself. Even ordinary moments carry more depth because you are no longer living on autopilot. You are aware. You are intentional. You are present in ways you never were before, and that presence reshapes everything. And yet, this presence does not come without its tests. There will still be moments when you are tempted to return to the old patterns, when the voices of doubt whisper that you were easier to love when you asked for less, when you stayed small, when you accepted silence instead of truth. But now you recognize those whispers for what they are, echoes of a past self that no longer exists. You do not fight them. You simply refuse to obey them. You acknowledge them, but you walk forward anyway. That quiet refusal is proof of how much you've grown. The more you grow, the more you understand that transformation is not about never feeling fear, doubt, or loneliness again. It is about refusing to let those feelings dictate your choices. You feel them, but you do not live by them. You honor them, but you do not obey them. This is the difference between who you were and who you are now. Before, fear shaped your path. Now, faith in your worth does. And as you move forward with that faith, the life you once thought was out of reach begins to unfold in front of you. This unfolding teaches you a final truth about this stage of your journey. You cannot measure your progress by the approval of others, nor by the timelines the world imposes on you. Your journey is not a race, it is a becoming. And becoming does not happen all at once. It happens in layers, in shifts, in moments so small you may not even notice them until you look back and realize how far you've come. This realization allows you to move with patience, to honor the process without rushing the outcome. You stop demanding perfection from yourself and instead celebrate the progress, no matter how quiet it seems. And so, as you continue to live in this awareness, you hold within you both the strength of what you've endured and the hope of what lies ahead. You no longer need to announce your transformation. It speaks for itself in the way you live, the way you love, the way you refuse to betray yourself again. You no longer need to seek permission to grow. Growth is your birthright. And you no longer need to fear becoming someone new. The person you are becoming is closer to the truth you were always meant to embody. That is the evidence of your evolution. Not that life became easier, but that you became truer. Not that the world changed for you, but that you changed within it. You are no longer who you used to be. And because of that, your life is no longer what it used to be. This truth is not an ending. It is the beginning of everything that was waiting for the moment you chose to honor yourself. And as this truth anchors deeper, you start to see how even your definition of love, success, and fulfillment has shifted. What once seemed like the ultimate measure of happiness, external approval, financial status, validation from those you admired, now feels secondary to the peace that rests within you. You understand that if peace is absent, no amount of recognition can replace it. And so you begin to prioritize differently, allowing your inner state to guide what you pursue instead of letting external expectations dictate your choices. This change brings a clarity that is both freeing and sobering. You notice how many parts of your past life were built on compromise of values, compromise of authenticity, compromise of the small truths you once silenced for the sake of acceptance. Looking back, you recognize how easily you ignored yourself just to be chosen. But now, that willingness has dissolved. You no longer choose situations that demand your silence. You no longer betray your values just to hold on to what doesn't fit. Instead, you allow the loss to happen even when it hurts, because you know that anything that requires the death of your spirit was never meant to stay. This understanding changes the way you handle endings, where once you resisted them, holding on long past the point of peace, you now allow them to unfold. You have realized that endings are not proof of failure but of growth. They are not punishments. They are transitions. And while you still feel the ache of letting go, you no longer confuse the ache with regret. The ache is simply evidence that you cared, that you invested, that you allowed yourself to experience deeply. But regret has no place in your heart anymore, because you see clearly now. You cannot regret becoming more whole, even if it cost you people and places along the way. This shift also transforms how you view beginnings. Instead of entering new spaces with desperation to be liked, you now enter with curiosity about whether they align with who you are becoming. You no longer shape yourself to fit in. You allow connections to reveal whether they fit you. This is not pride, it is self-respect. You recognize that every beginning is not a blessing, and every opportunity is not meant to be taken. Discernment leads you to embrace only what adds to your life, not what subtracts from it. And though this selectivity may limit what enters, it ensures that what remains is aligned. With this discernment, you also start to release the illusion that everyone must come with you into the next season of your life. There was a time when you tried to hold on to every connection, stretching yourself thin just to keep the bonds intact. But now you realize that love does not always mean longevity. Some people were meant only for a chapter, and when their role is complete, clinging to them only delays your own progress. This release is painful, but it is also purifying. It reminds you that growth always demands courage. The courage to continue walking, even if it means walking with fewer people by your side. As you let go, you find yourself more protective of the spaces you allow yourself to enter. You choose environments that nurture your spirit rather than drain it. You seek out voices that uplift rather than diminish. You surround yourself with those who not only see your worth, but reflect it back to you through their actions. This intentionality reshapes your community. It creates a circle not of convenience but of alignment, a circle where your growth is celebrated, not resented. And in that circle, you feel safer, freer, and more able to expand into your truest self. This alignment also reshapes how you handle conflict, where once you may have sacrificed your truth to avoid tension, you now speak honestly, even when it risks discomfort. You understand that real peace is not built on avoidance, but on authenticity. Silence that erases you is no longer an option. You no longer measure the health of a relationship by the absence of arguments, but by the presence of respect during them. This shift changes not only how you handle conflict with others, but also how you resolve it within yourself. Instead of suppressing your feelings, you honor them. Instead of hiding from your wounds, you tend to them. And in that tending, you find a deeper wholeness than avoidance ever gave you. The wholeness you are building is not fragile. It is not dependent on how gently others treat you or how consistently they affirm you. It comes from within, from the choice you make daily to honor your truth. This makes you less reactive, less easily swayed by outside noise. You no longer lose yourself in the chaos of other people's expectations because you have learned to listen more to your own. You begin to live with a rhythm that is steady, not frantic, a rhythm that allows you to move forward with confidence instead of fear. This steadiness brings with it a new kind of confidence, not loud or boastful, but quiet and unshakable. You no longer need to declare your worth, you live it. You no longer need to argue for your place, you embody it. This quiet confidence may unsettle those who benefited from your doubt, but you do not dim it for their comfort. You understand now that your confidence is not arrogance, it is the fruit of your healing. It is the evidence of every battle you fought and every choice you made to honor yourself. And as this confidence grows, you begin to see how your life is no longer defined by survival but by intention. You are no longer reacting to what life throws at you. You are choosing how to respond. You no longer settle for what comes easily. You wait for what comes rightly. You no longer run from discomfort. You allow it to refine you. This shift is not small, it is everything. It marks the difference between living a life you endure and living a life you embrace. When you look at where you stand now, you can see clearly that the journey has not been without cost. You have lost people, habits, and versions of yourself that once felt inseparable. But in their place, you have gained something far more valuable. A self that is aligned, a heart that is steady, a peace that cannot be stolen. You are no longer who you used to be, and though the world may not understand it, you no longer seek their understanding. What you seek is truth. What you seek is alignment. What you seek is to live fully as the person you have become. And that is the freedom you carry now, the freedom of not needing to return to who you were, because who you are becoming is far greater than anything you left behind. And with this freedom, you notice how your priorities begin to reorder themselves in ways you never anticipated. What once felt urgent now feels secondary, while the things you once ignored suddenly reveal their importance. You realize that success without alignment is hollow, and connection without respect is empty. This awakening pushes you to choose with greater intention, no longer pulled by old habits of proving or pleasing, but guided by a quieter wisdom that tells you what is right for you. You stop measuring your worth against timelines imposed by others. The race that once consumed you no longer defines you, because you now understand that growth is not measured by speed but by depth. The life you are building may not look impressive on the surface, but it carries substance, and that is what sustains you. The comparisons that once haunted you begin to fade, because you see that your path was never meant to mirror anyone else's. Your pace is yours alone, and it is enough. This awareness strengthens your ability to say no without guilt. You no longer give in to obligations that leave you drained. You no longer agree to commitments that do not reflect your values. Each no becomes a declaration of your healing, because it shows that you will not abandon yourself for the comfort of others. And while this firmness may confuse those accustomed to your compliance, it also reveals who respects you and who only valued your silence. At the same time, you begin to say yes more freely to the things that truly matter. You give your energy to the projects that ignite you, to the people who honor you, to the practices that restore you. These yeses are not given out of pressure, but out of alignment. They reflect the life you are creating, not the one you are escaping. With every choice, you shape a reality that feels more authentic, more intentional, more sustainable. This intentional living changes how you experience even the smallest moments. The quiet mornings, the still evenings, the simple conversations, they all carry weight now, because you are present in them. You no longer rush through your days in search of a future that will finally make you feel whole. Instead, you understand that wholeness is found in the way you show up right here, right now. Gratitude grows in this awareness, reminding you that peace is not waiting in some distant place but available in the choices you make today. Yet, even as gratitude deepens, there are moments when grief returns. Grief for the relationships that could not survive your growth. Grief for the dreams that no longer fit. Grief for the version of you that once felt safe in smaller spaces. This grief does not undo your progress. It honors it. It reminds you that growth is not a straight line but a process that asks you to release again and again. Each wave of grief becomes another layer of healing, another chance to affirm that you are no longer willing to go back to what once held you down. And in these moments of grief, you learn compassion for yourself. Where once you might have criticized your tears or shamed yourself for struggling, now you extend patience. You see your humanity not as weakness, but as proof that you are alive, that you are still capable of feeling deeply, even after everything you prize have endured. This compassion softens the sharp edges of your journey and allows you to move forward without carrying unnecessary shame. This gentleness with yourself transforms how you approach others as well. You no longer demand perfection because you understand that everyone is fighting battles you cannot see. But you also no longer excuse patterns that harm you because compassion without boundaries is not love, it is self-betrayal. This balance allows you to love freely while protecting your spirit. It allows you to give without being emptied and to forgive without being used. As this balance takes root, your relationships begin to look different. You find yourself surrounded less by those who drain you and more by those who honor your presence. The conversations deepen, the connections strengthen, and the love you experience feels steadier. You no longer settle for attention dressed as care. You wait for actions that prove devotion. This shift ensures that the love in your life is not based on illusion but on truth, not on fear but on freedom. And this freedom extends to the way you hold your future, where once you may have been paralyzed by uncertainty, now you see the unknown as possibility. You no longer demand to know every detail of what's ahead, because you trust the foundation you have built. The person you are becoming feels capable of meeting what comes, not because life will always be easy, but because you are no longer fragile in the ways you once were. You move forward with a quiet courage, trusting that each step will reveal the strength you need to take the next. With this courage, you start to dream differently. Your dreams are no longer rooted in desperation for approval or fear of being left behind. They are rooted in authenticity. You dream not of escaping yourself, but of expanding into your fullest self. These dreams are not about performing for others, but about creating a life that reflects your deepest truths. And while they may look simpler from the outside, they carry a richness that only alignment can bring. This is the heart of your transformation. You are not building a life that looks impressive, but one that feels right. You are not striving to be who you used to be, nor are you chasing the version others expect of you. You are allowing yourself to become who you truly are, and that becoming is more powerful than any image you once tried to uphold. And so you step into this new chapter with steady hands, carrying the lessons, the losses, and the love that shaped you. You no longer apologize for the distance between who you were and who you are now. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable with your growth. You no longer wait for permission to honor your truth. Instead, you live it, unapologetically, fully, faithfully, because you are not who you used to be, and every step forward confirms that this transformation is not temporary. It is the life you are choosing, the freedom you are embracing, the truth you are finally ready to live. And as you continue to embrace this life that reflects your truth, you notice how the very atmosphere around you begins to shift. What you attract is no longer based on the wounds you carried, but on the wholeness you now embody. The people who enter your space arrive with energy that mirrors your alignment, not your brokenness. They do not feed off your silence, they respect it. They do not demand your constant sacrifice, they value your presence. This shift does not happen overnight, but as you honor yourself consistently, the world begins to respond in kind. You also find that your confidence no longer comes from external confirmation, but from the quiet knowledge that you are enough as you are. You stop waiting for someone else to name your worth because you already know it. This confidence is not loud, it is steady. It does not beg to be seen, it simply exists. And because it is steady, it cannot be easily shaken. Criticism that once pierced you deeply now feels less defining, because you no longer need universal approval to validate your path. Praise, too, is received differently. You welcome it, but you do not depend on it. Both are acknowledged, but neither holds power over you. This independence strengthens your ability to take risks that once felt impossible. You begin to step into opportunities that previously intimidated you because you no longer measure success by whether others approve, but by whether it aligns with your purpose. The fear of failure that used to paralyze you loses its grip because you understand that failure is not final. It is feedback. You are willing to try, to stumble, to learn, because your identity is not bound to perfection. This willingness to embrace uncertainty expands your life in ways that safety never could. With this expansion comes a new sense of responsibility, not the heavy burden you once carried for everyone else's happiness, but a responsibility to yourself. You understand that no one else can protect your peace, no one else can guard your energy, no one else can live your truth. This responsibility is empowering because it reminds you that you are not helpless. You are capable of shaping your own reality. You stop blaming others for what they cannot give and instead focus on what you can create for yourself. And as you create, you notice a deepening of your resilience. Challenges still come, but they do not consume you in the same way. Instead of asking, "Why me?" you ask, "What can this teach me?" Instead of collapsing under pressure, you pause, breathe, and respond with clarity. Resilience no longer feels like a forced performance. It feels like a natural extension of the strength you have built. You know that life will not always be easy, but you also know that you have survived enough to trust yourself through the storms that remain. This trust in yourself reshapes how you carry your past. Where once you may have felt haunted by memories of mistakes or betrayals, now you see them as teachers. You stop replaying old regrets because you realize that they served their purpose. They pushed you toward the growth you are living now. The shame that once weighed on you dissolves, replaced by gratitude for the lessons learned. You no longer hide from your history. You acknowledge it without letting it define you. It becomes part of your story, but not the whole of it. With this new relationship to your past, you also begin to experience forgiveness differently. Forgiveness is no longer about excusing what hurt you. It is about freeing yourself from the grip of bitterness. You release not to minimize the wrong done, but to reclaim the energy that holding on was draining from you. This release allows you to move forward without carrying the weight of anger that once consumed your spirit. Forgiveness becomes an act of liberation, not reconciliation. You do not need to reopen old doors to prove you have healed. You simply walk forward without them holding you back. And as you walk forward, your vision of the future expands. You are no longer tied to survival thinking, where the goal was simply to make it through the day. You now allow yourself to imagine more, to plan more, to believe in possibilities that once felt too far away. Your dreams are not fueled by fear of lack, but by a sense of abundance you have cultivated within yourself. Even if the future remains uncertain, you approach it with hope rather than dread. This hope is not naive. It is grounded in the evidence of all you have overcome. In this hope, you also notice a renewed openness to joy. Joy no longer feels like something fleeting that might be taken away at any moment. It feels like something you are worthy of, something you can welcome without apology. You give yourself permission to laugh, to rest, to savor, without waiting for everything to be perfect. You understand that joy is not a reward at the end of struggle, but a companion that can walk with you even through difficulty. This openness shifts the tone of your life, making space for light, even in the midst of heaviness. This light naturally draws you toward service, not service that depletes you, but service that flows from the abundance you now carry. You begin to share your journey, your lessons, your strength, not to prove anything, but to offer hope to others who are still finding their way. Your presence itself becomes a reminder that change is possible, that healing is real, that life after pain can be fuller than life before it. You realize that the best way to honor your transformation is not only to live it, but to let it inspire those who cross your path. And so your story continues, not as a repetition of who you once were, but as an unfolding of who you are becoming. Each day you live from this healed place, You deepen the truth that you cannot return to the old version of yourself. You have outgrown it. You have replaced fear with trust, chaos with clarity, depletion with alignment. The evidence is not in what you say, but in how you live, how you choose, how you move forward without apology. This is the reality of transformation. It is not a single moment, but a lifetime of honoring the truth that you are no longer who you used to be. And the more you embody it, the more you realize that the greatest gift of healing is not simply surviving, it is becoming. And as this becoming deepens, you realize that the way you define strength itself has shifted. Strength is no longer the image of enduring silently while breaking inside. It is the practice of standing fully in your truth without apology. It is not about how much you can carry for others while neglecting yourself, but about how faithfully you carry the responsibility of honoring your own spirit. This new strength feels lighter, yet more powerful, because it does not come from force, it comes from alignment. With this shift, your decisions begin to reflect a deeper wisdom. You no longer chase after everything that looks appealing, because you know not every opportunity is meant for you. You pause, you discern, you listen within before committing, and in that listening, you save yourself from paths that would have drained you. This kind of wisdom is not loud, but it transforms everything. It allows you to walk away without regret, to say no without guilt, to let go without fear. Each decision becomes less about pleasing others and more about creating a life that mirrors the wholeness you now embody. This wholeness begins to transform your relationships too. The connections that remain in your life are not based on dependency, but on mutual respect. You no longer confuse attachment with love or obligation with loyalty. Instead, you look for reciprocity, for shared growth, for presence that feels nourishing rather than draining. You realize that love does not need to be begged for or earned. It is either freely given or not worth holding on to. And in this recognition, you release the weight of trying to convince people to see your value. Those who see it will never need convincing, and those who do not are not your responsibility to persuade. The clarity this brings begins to ripple outward. Conversations feel different because you are no longer afraid of silence. You do not fill the air with words to keep people close. You allow pauses, trusting that real connection does not fear quiet. Your presence itself becomes enough. This confidence in simply being transforms the quality of your interactions. People feel the steadiness in you, the calm that is no longer desperate to impress or prove. And while not everyone will understand it, those who do are drawn to it in a way that feels authentic and lasting. As you hold to this authenticity, you also begin to notice how much less reactive you have become. Where once criticism or conflict might have shaken you, now you respond with perspective. You no longer absorb every opinion as truth because you understand the difference between someone's projection and your reality. You no longer fear disagreement because you are no longer dependent on universal acceptance. This composure does not mean you are indifferent. It means you are anchored. It allows you to engage without losing yourself, to listen without absorbing, to respond without being consumed. From this anchored place, your vision for your life expands even further. You begin to dream again, not as an escape, but as a declaration of possibility. Dreams are no longer distant fantasies, but living reflections of the life you are building daily. You understand that what once felt impossible is now within reach, not because everything outside has changed, but because everything inside has. You carry yourself as someone who belongs in the spaces you once only admired from afar, because you now know your worth does not shrink in the presence of greatness, it rises to meet it. And as you step into these larger spaces, humility and gratitude walk with you. Gratitude for the lessons that shaped you, gratitude for the resilience that sustained you, gratitude for the clarity that now guides you. Gratitude becomes your anchor, reminding you that even in moments of expansion, you remain grounded. This gratitude prevents you from slipping back into the patterns of striving for more while forgetting the value of what you already hold. It keeps you steady, reminding you that abundance is not just what you pursue, but also what you recognize in this very moment. This recognition brings you to a new understanding of freedom. Freedom is not the absence of responsibility, but the presence of choice. It is knowing that you no longer have to live bound by expectations that do not reflect your truth. It is the ability to design your life in ways that honor your values, your needs, your peace. This freedom is subtle but profound. It is not something others can grant you. It is something you claim within yourself. And once claimed, it becomes the foundation of how you move, how you decide, how you live. Living from this foundation changes the rhythm of your days. You no longer wake up bracing yourself for survival, but welcoming the possibility of growth. You begin to notice the details you once rushed past, the quiet moments, the small victories, the gentle reminders that you are alive and capable of joy even in simplicity. Life does not need to be dramatic to be meaningful. It can be steady, and that steadiness itself is powerful. You embrace this new rhythm as evidence that transformation is not always loud, but it is always real. In this rhythm, you learn to trust timing more deeply. You do not force doors to open, you allow them to reveal themselves in their season. You do not compare your journey to others, because you understand that your path unfolds uniquely. This trust in timing protects you from the impatience that once led you into places not meant for you. It reminds you that what is aligned cannot be rushed, and what is not aligned cannot be forced. This patience, once difficult, now feels like wisdom, because you see how every delay, every pause, every redirection has led you closer to the truth of who you are. And as this truth continues to unfold, you realize that you no longer crave certainty as much as you crave authenticity. Certainty was the old measure, the desire to control every outcome, to guarantee every step. Authenticity is the new one, the willingness to be real, even when the outcome is unknown. This shift allows you to live more fully because you are no longer holding back, waiting for guarantees. You step forward with openness, trusting that being true to yourself is the only foundation you truly need. From this openness flows a deeper connection with life itself. You no longer separate yourself from it as though you were simply enduring it. You participate in it, fully aware, fully present, fully engaged. Every step, every choice, every moment carries meaning because you are no longer detached from it. You are here, and being here is enough. And in being here fully, you begin to experience life, not as something to be endured, but as something to be lived with intention. The heaviness of always striving gives way to the clarity of simply showing up as you are. You find that you no longer measure your days by how much you achieve, but by how closely your choices reflect the truth of who you are becoming. This shift transforms even the smallest routines into meaningful acts, because they are no longer fueled by pressure, but by alignment. This alignment reveals itself most clearly in how you treat yourself. Where once you ignored your own needs, pushing past exhaustion and silencing your inner signals, you now listen more closely. You begin to respect your body's requests for rest, your mind's need for stillness, your heart's longing for honesty. These acts of self-respect become the foundation of your well-being, and they remind you that honoring yourself is not indulgence, it is necessary. Without this foundation, nothing else you build can stand. From this respect for yourself grows a new clarity about what you allow into your life. You become more intentional about the spaces you enter, the voices you entertain, the influences you permit. You understand now that not every invitation is meant to be accepted, and not every presence deserves access to you. This discernment protects your energy and allows you to cultivate environments that nurture your growth rather than stifle it. The more you practice this discernment, the lighter your life becomes, because you are no longer carrying what was never yours to hold. This lightness does not mean you avoid responsibility. On the contrary, it deepens your understanding of responsibility. You take ownership of your choices, your words, your actions, not out of fear but out of integrity. You understand that accountability is not a burden but a sign of maturity. It reflects the truth that you are no longer running from yourself, but standing firmly in who you are. And this kind of responsibility does not weigh you down, it liberates you, because it aligns your inner values with your outer actions. As this integrity strengthens, your vision for what is possible expands. You begin to dream in ways you once considered too daring. You realize that the limits you once believed in were not truths, but reflections of your old fears. With fear no longer steering your decisions, possibilities multiply. You find yourself daring to imagine a life shaped not by what others expect of you, but by what you know is possible within you. These dreams feel different now, not like distant fantasies, but like invitations to step into the next chapter of your growth. Alongside these dreams comes the courage to pursue them. You no longer wait for perfect conditions or external validation before beginning. You understand that progress is not about flawless execution, but about steady steps forward. Each action you take, however small, reinforces your belief in yourself. And as you move, you realize that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move even with fear present. This courage builds momentum, and with each step, the path ahead becomes clearer. This clarity also reshapes the way you view challenges. Where once they appeared as obstacles meant to break you, now you see them as invitations to strengthen what is already within you. You no longer panic when difficulties arise. You approach them with patience, with perspective, with resilience that has been earned through lived experience. You trust that you have faced enough storms to know that you can endure and emerge wiser. This trust changes everything because it replaces dread with confidence, uncertainty with adaptability, and fear with faith in your own capacity. And with this adaptability, you find yourself less rigid in how life must unfold. You no longer cling to strict timelines or narrow definitions of success. Instead, you allow life to unfold while remaining grounded in your truth. This flexibility brings peace because it reminds you that even when plans shift, your worth does not. You can adjust without losing yourself, adapt without abandoning your values, evolve without erasing your essence. This realization brings both calm and strength because it anchors you in a kind of stability that circumstances cannot shake. From this stability emerges a deeper connection with others. You begin to recognize the difference between relationships that drain and those that nourish, between words that flatter and words that sustain. You become more intentional in who you share your time and energy with, and this intentionality strengthens your connections. You no longer feel the need to surround yourself with crowds to feel whole. Instead, you cultivate relationships that honor depth, respect, and authenticity. The quality of your connections becomes far more important than the quantity, and in this refinement, you find genuine belonging. This belonging is not based on conformity, but on acceptance. You no longer mold yourself into shapes that keep others comfortable. You present yourself as you are, trusting that the right people will recognize your worth without requiring you to compromise it. This trust allows you to move through life with openness rather than fear. You no longer chase acceptance because you understand that what is real does not need to be chased. It meets you where you are. Through all of this, you come to recognize that the journey is not about becoming someone else, but about returning to yourself. Every shift, every boundary, every choice brings you closer to the person you were always meant to be, the person beneath the expectations, the fears, the doubts, the old wounds. You are no longer trying to escape yourself. You are learning to embody yourself more fully, and in doing so, you discover a sense of peace that is not dependent on circumstances, but rooted in authenticity. This authenticity changes the way you carry hope. Hope is no longer a fragile wish for something outside of your control. It becomes a steady trust in the resilience you have built. You do not wait for external guarantees. You trust that whatever comes, you will meet it with the strength and wisdom you now hold. This hope is not naive. It is grounded, steady, and enduring. It is the quiet belief that no matter what unfolds, you will remain true to yourself. And with this belief, you move forward not as who you once were, but as who you are becoming. You do not look back with longing, because you understand that nothing behind you can compare to the life you are creating now. The past may have shaped you, but it no longer defines you. You are free, you are whole, and you are ready for whatever lies ahead. And as you step further into this awareness, you begin to notice that the person you are now carries a depth that no past version could have held. It is not just that you think differently, it is that you move differently, you breathe differently, you exist differently. You are no longer trying to survive life. You are choosing to live it with presence and clarity. This choice, though simple in words, changes everything because it grounds you in a truth that cannot be undone. You are not who you used to be, and you no longer need to measure yourself by who you once were. The patterns that once dictated your choices now feel foreign. You do not reach for what hurt you before, nor do you seek comfort in what once left you empty. The repetition of old cycles no longer holds power over you, because you see them clearly for what they were, lessons, not destinations. You no longer confuse temporary distractions for lasting fulfillment, and this clarity allows you to step away from what once kept you bound. Every time you choose differently, every time you honor your growth, you prove to yourself that you are walking in a new direction. And with each step in this direction, your confidence deepens. Not the loud confidence that shouts to be seen, but the quiet kind that needs no announcement. It is the confidence of knowing you can trust yourself, knowing that you no longer betray your own needs just to be accepted. This confidence does not demand attention, it simply radiates through your choices. Others may notice it, others may question it, but you know it comes from within. It is the product of every moment you chose truth over pretense, every moment you chose alignment over approval, every moment you chose yourself over the comfort of staying the same. This steady confidence begins to shape your vision for the future. You realize that what lies ahead is not meant to repeat what has already been lived. You are not here to rebuild the same story in different colors. You are here to write new chapters that honor the person you have become. And in this vision, you give yourself permission to dream without fear of judgment, to set goals without the weight of comparison, to build a life that reflects your healed perspective. The path may not be linear, but it no longer intimidates you, because you trust that every step forward is a step deeper into your own truth. Trust becomes the anchor of this new way of living. Trust in yourself, trust in your resilience, trust that even when uncertainty surrounds you, you will not lose the ground you have claimed within. This trust frees you from the constant need for external reassurance because you understand that no one else can validate what you already know. You are enough as you are. And when you live from this place of trust, your life begins to align more naturally because you no longer cling to what was never meant for you. You allow things to arrive and depart without breaking because your foundation is no longer outside of you, it is within you. From this place, forgiveness takes on a new form, not the kind of forgiveness that denies the pain or excuses the harm, but the kind that releases you from carrying the weight of what you cannot change. You no longer replay every wound in your mind, nor do you keep old scars alive by refusing to let them heal. Forgiveness becomes less about others and more about yourself, a conscious choice to unclench your spirit from what would otherwise keep you stuck. This choice creates more room within you, room for peace, room for love, room for possibility. And in making this choice, you remind yourself that freedom is not only about leaving what is outside of you, but also about releasing what is inside of you. And in that release, joy begins to return in ways you did not expect. Not the fleeting kind that depends on circumstances, but the grounded kind that rises from simply being present. You begin to notice joy in stillness, in connection, in authenticity. You find yourself smiling without needing a reason, laughing without needing permission, appreciating moments that once would have passed unnoticed. This joy is not loud, but it is steady, And it reminds you that healing is not just about what you let go of, it is also about what you allow back in. As you continue forward, you begin to realize that everything you once thought you lost has transformed into something greater. The relationships that ended made room for deeper ones. The opportunities that slipped away cleared the space for alignment. The pain you carried became the soil for wisdom. You see now that nothing was wasted, because every experience contributed to the person you are today. And this realization brings a peace that no explanation could ever capture. A peace that tells you your journey has been worth it, not because it was easy, but because it was real. And so, when others look at you and say you have changed, you do not shrink or apologize. You do not feel the need to defend who you have become. You understand that growth will always look like distance to those who remain in the places you have left behind. But you also know that you cannot return to who you once were, because that version no longer fits the life you are creating. You have outgrown the patterns, the cycles, the spaces that kept you small, and you now stand in a freedom that cannot be taken. This freedom is not just about leaving behind what was, but about stepping fully into what is. It is about living with a sense of authenticity that no longer bends to the pressure of expectation. It is about knowing that your worth is not measured by how much you endure, but by how fully you embrace yourself. It is about carrying forward the truth that you are no longer who you used to be, and that is not loss, but transformation. And so, you close this chapter not with regret, but with reverence. Reverence for the lessons, reverence for the growth, reverence for the journey that carried you here. You step into what comes next with open hands and steady heart, knowing that you are ready, because the truth is clear now, written in every choice, every boundary, every step forward. You are no longer who you used to be, and that is the greatest gift you could have ever given yourself.